Hello. So, since it is 9 o'clock, I'm going to go ahead and welcome all of us. So, I just want to say welcome to the BIG Youth Conference. We are excited that all of you have tuned in today because we have some special things in store for you all. I just want to start by saying a big thank you to Texas Farm Bureau, our sponsors, and as well as the Extra Co Event Center for sponsoring us today. Today, you're going to get to hear from two amazing speakers, as well as at the end from a panel of Texas 4-H as well as Texas FFA state officers, moderated by none other than yours truly. Howdy, I am I'm Brinley Allison. I'm from Lorena, Texas. I'm a senior. I live in McLennan County, where I currently serve as the District 8 4-H president, as well as the Texas 4-H second vice president. I'm so honored and blessed to get to moderate and as well as MC and introduce the awesome speakers today. So, with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker. Well, actually, first, make sure if you just joined on to please drop your name and whoever's with you in the name box below so we can know who all is on today. But anyways, I'm going to introduce Dr. Whit Weems, who is the Director of Organization for Texas Farm Bureau. He's going to be our first speaker for today. So, Dr. Weems, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Brinley. What an honor and a privilege it is to get to speak to you all today. I'm actually sitting in Atlanta, Georgia right now at the American Farm Bureau annual convention. And we've got a lot of farmers and ranchers in town from all across the country and Puerto Rico here that are making decisions today on various policy that will impact agriculture and consumers for generations to come. So it's exciting to get to speak to you about the voice of agriculture when we have so many farmers and ranchers today that are representing that voice from across the country and talking about agriculture issues that we face every day. And so I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint here. To talk a little bit about finding your voice in agriculture to better serve your community. And so as we started looking at that and I started thinking about that topic, I thought, oh, that'll be easy to do. That'll be something that'll be really easy to talk about. And having the privilege to work for Texas Farm Bureau and work for farmers and ranchers across the state of Texas, and we serve as the voice of agriculture, I thought that's going to be something that'll be just really easy to talk about. And then as I started breaking it down and really thinking about the pieces of finding your voice, becomes a little bit more challenging because every one of you has a different voice. Every one of you comes from a different background. Every one of you has different ideas, and every one of you is going to portray your voice in a different way. And so as I thought through this, I thought a little bit about just sharing my background and talking about how I found my voice and where my voice came from. A little bit about me. I grew up in Erath County, got involved in 4-H and FFA there. I didn't come from an agriculture background. My dad was a woodworker and built cabinets and doors. My mom worked for the school district. And so I wasn't really involved in agriculture. My granddad had a few cows, and so that was my background and my upbringing. And when I started getting into growing up and getting into elementary school, I started getting involved in 4-H and started by showing pigs and really found a passion for agriculture. You know, I always loved seeing tractors and cows and going to my granddad's and putting out hay with him. And it really started developing a passion for livestock and animals and producing food and fiber. So got involved in 4-H, showing pigs. That began to grow. As I got into high school, I also got involved in FFA, got involved more in leadership activities through FFA and doing some of those types of things. And that's really where the voice began to grow. You started getting involved in different activities that gave you an opportunity to find what you're passionate about, to find what you're interested in, and really start to develop a message of who you are and what you want to share with others. And so that was a really important part of my background of finding my voice, is because those were the things that really I took interest in. As I moved on to college and got involved in college, I got involved in different organizations in college, and was actively engaged in a lot of that, as well as some of the classes that I took that really helped develop me as a speaker. Then I started to get involved in agriculture organizations. And I think this is where it really took off, is as you started thinking about different agriculture organizations, and what those opportunities were. One of those, of course, being Texas Farm Bureau. I was actively involved in the organization from the member side before I became staff there. Was actively involved in many different types of ag organizations across the state. I was a county extension agent, had the opportunity to work with 4-H youth and with producers all across the state of Texas during my tenure as a county extension agent, and just really share the message of agriculture and learn more about agriculture in general. But then sometimes you don't think about your voice coming from places like church or from your family. There's many times during activities at church or different activities where we had family gatherings or family together, that there was an opportunity for me to really share who I was, or share the background or agriculture issues that came up. So next, I want to talk a little bit about why finding your voice is important. When we look at it, the average consumer now is 3 to 4 generations disconnected from the farm. And so as we think about that, it's really important to find your voice and be an advocate in your community, especially for agriculture, because those generations now have been disconnected. They don't know what it's like to be on that farm. They don't know the challenges that are faced. They don't know the practices that are in place. And then also, social media and technology has created a great opportunity for you to provide a voice through those methods. Telling your story through social media is a great way to get your voice out there. But it also provides a big platform for misconceptions and mistruths. And so that's something that I kind of wanted to focus on a little bit today when we talk about finding our voice. There was a USFRA study that I'm going to share some of these highlights with you, and just think about these as we talk through them. 72% of consumers know nothing or very little about farming or ranching. So that's 72% of the consumers out there that don't know much about farming and ranching and what we do in agriculture. But 69% of those consumers think about food production at least somewhat often. The interesting fact to me is 72% of consumers say they know nothing or very little about agriculture, but yet 70% say their purchase decisions are affected by how that food is grown and raised. So there's a huge opportunity out there for you to share your voice and use your voice to talk about agriculture and talk about how production agriculture takes place. More than 1 in 4 Americans admit they're often confused about the food they're purchasing. So that's another fact that you can think about. 3 in 5 Americans would like to know more about how food is grown and raised. So people are out there, they're hungry for the information. And so there's an opportunity for you to find your voice and use it to share with those others. And then young adults are more likely than any other age group to say they're often confused about food purchases. And so I think those are some interesting facts for you to look back on later and think about as you start looking at, where can my voice be used? How can I find my voice to share with others about agriculture or my community? So next, a few definitions here that just kind of help us talk about this a little bit. When you think about what it is to find your voice, well, let's talk about, what is your voice? Your voice is to say what you think about a particular subject, especially to express a doubt, complaint that you have about it. And so giving your voice is an opportunity for you to talk through that subject. It's to talk about whatever. We talked a lot about passion, finding your passion. Your voice is an opportunity for you to find that passion. Advocacy. We talk a lot about advocacy, and there's many programs, especially across 4-H and FFA, that focus on advocacy and those efforts. That's a public support for an idea, plan, or way of doing something. An influencer, someone who affects or changes the way that other people behave. So oftentimes we think of people that have a voice as being influencers. That's an important part of sharing your voice, but know that not everyone's not sharing your voice. You don't have to be an influencer to share your voice and to find your voice and talk about the things that you're passionate about. Another thing that's really critical is facts versus fiction. Something that is known to have happened or to exist versus something that's a false report or a statement. Oftentimes we see many misconceptions about the agriculture industry, and sharing those facts is an important way that you can use your voice. So you heard me talk a lot about passion. I think finding your passion is a critical piece. Every one of us, when we look at how do we develop our voice and how do we get there, I think it has to start with what are you passionate about? When you're passionate about something, it's much easier to engage with people. It's much easier to connect with them and share your story and talk about your interests. Know your topic and subject. It is so critical that you know what you're talking about. We mentioned the misconceptions that are out there, and being able to talk about those misconceptions and share those share why those misconceptions are there, and help overcome those are really critical. So understanding your topic and knowing what you're talking about makes you more credible. Understand your audience. There's a wide variety of audiences that are out there. When you're looking at finding your voice, when you're looking at connecting to someone, who do you want to target? What message do you want to share? What is it that you're passionate about? And being able to find that right audience to interact with and engage with is critical. Develop a strategy. Sit down and say, here's the things that I'm passionate about. Here's the things that I want to talk about. Here's the way that I want to relay this message to others. That may be through social media. That may be through getting involved in other ag organizations. That may be from just writing different things to individuals, or writing your legislators, or doing different tasks like that. Always be positive and professional. I think that a lot of times we get caught up in emotion when we talk about advocating and sharing our voice with others. And that emotional piece is important, but we have to be careful that we remain professional and positive when we do that. Know your strengths and weaknesses. You know, as you start looking at doing interviews and getting involved in things, one of the common questions that always comes up is, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Sometimes that's a difficult question to work through, but I think it's important that you sit down and you identify what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. Once you can identify those, that helps you become stronger at sharing your voice. Use your strengths and then recognize that you may have some weaknesses that are areas you need to work on improving, or areas that you need to redirect, and focus on those strengths to share your passion. And be flexible. Know that often, many times when you engage in conversation with individuals, it's going to go many different directions, but the engagement piece and and connecting with them is what makes it important. Okay, a little activity here for you, and we'll work through this. And please feel free to interact as we work through this. But if you've got a piece of paper and a pencil handy, here's some things that I just want to talk through about finding your voice and how you can do that. And this was modified from an exercise on finding your voice in writing, but I think it's really relates to help you find your voice when it comes to being involved in your community and advocating for your interest. And so, first thing I want you to do is write down 3 adjectives that describe you. What are 3 different adjectives that describe you as a person? Brinley, you may have to help me out here, but if someone wants to share anything in the chat, please do so as far as throw an adjective out that describes them. Anybody want to volunteer to do that? Okay. Thanks, Grady. Old fashioned, another one, kind. When you think about those things and you think about your adjectives that describe you, now I want you to ask yourself, if I'm communicating with others related to the adjectives I use to describe myself, how does that person feel about me? Are they going to want to engage with me? Are they going to want to communicate with me? And so I see a lot of great things: ambitious, charismatic, honest, serious, loyal. All of those are great traits. So when you think about that, sit down, take some time, identify those adjectives that describe you. Find some that are positive. Find some that, you may have some adjectives that can describe you that, not always positive. And think about, how do others perceive you through those adjectives when you're engaging and communicating with them? All right, next thing is describe characteristics of the ideal person to engage in conversation with. Think about, if you're going to engage with somebody and advocate about something you're passionate about, who do you really want to talk to? What would that person be like? What would be the ideal person to engage in conversation? Okay, good listener, open-minded, attentive, truthful, understanding. All right, those are some great examples. If we next, let's go ahead and move to the next one. Next, if we look at characteristics of someone that's the most challenging people to engage in a conversation with, what do we find? Intimidating, overly emotional. All right. As you get out there and you start advocating, you start sharing your voice, you start engaging with others, you're going to see and come across people that represent both of those spectrums. From people that are the ideal people to engage with, that have those characteristics, to people that are most challenging. As you begin to work through that, I think it's important that you think through those things. You think about, who's that target audience that I'm going to communicate with, and what are they going to, how are they going to react to the message that I want to share? Or how do you need to react to the message that you share? What about some influencers? Are there any influencers out there that you follow or that you interact with, that you communicate with? Okay, I see Del Brisby. Any others? What do we think about when we think about an influencer? Who is an influencer? I think about, sometimes when I think about an influencer, my mind immediately goes to someone that goes viral in social media, right? I think that's something that we often think about. But I see some things coming up. One who leaves a legacy for the public to see, a person who shares interests, someone with a large following, someone who believes in their messages and willing to share it. I think those are all true. I don't think an influencer is always necessarily someone that's on social media either. I think it's someone that carries a genuine message. They're genuine about the message that they have. They care about others and how others perceive that. And they want to share their story. They want to share their message, and they want to make a difference. and they're passionate about that and passionate about carrying that message about. Okay, now I want you to think about your social media accounts a little bit. I want you to, if you look back and you scroll through written communication that you've had with others, and your communication that you have on social media, or the communication that you have through text messaging others, or any way that you may communicate, think about reading it from a perspective of a consumer who's someone who's disconnected from agriculture. Would you engage in conversation with yourself? I think that's the important thing that we talk about when we really look at finding that voice, is if you're trying to share a message with others that do not maybe see the same way that you do, that do not follow that that same path, are they going to want to engage in conversation with you? If you're going to use your social media to carry your voice, are the things that you've posted on social media, or the things that you've shared on social media, going to attract others to want to engage with you to have that conversation? Or is it going to, are there things on there that are going to be a turnoff for people that you really need to be connecting to and that you really need to be engaging with? And so that's just something to think about as you do that. The other things, pay attention to detail. Really think through what you're talking about. Pay attention to the detail that you share. Make sure that you're accurate. Make sure that the things that you share are those facts, and that you can stand behind what you want to engage with others on. And last, how does all this make you feel? Are you nervous about it? Are you afraid about it? Are you comfortable sharing your voice? Are you comfortable engaging with others? I think it's perfectly okay to be any of those. If you're nervous about it, if you're afraid about it, if you're afraid of interacting with others, if you're afraid engaging in conversation with others, that's okay. The first step would be that you're identifying those things and talking through it. If I think back on my story and think about the days when I first got involved, I was a shy kid. I didn't want to get up in front of people. I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to engage with anybody. And through opportunities like 4-H, through opportunities like FFA, through opportunities of being involved in organizations and agriculture organizations, that's changed. And finding that passion and finding the things that you're passionate about and wanting to share those, I'm much more comfortable to interact and engage with consumers now from doing that. So everybody's voice is going to look completely different. Each and every one of you are going to share a different voice and do that in a different way. Some of you may choose social media to do that. Some of you may do that from public speaking, and that's okay. It's just finding that voice is finding your comfort level and finding your passion and how you want to communicate that message. So with that, Brinley, I'll open it up for any questions or discussion that people may have.
If anyone would like to put a question in the chat box, or they can jump on their screen and ask a question, we have a little bit more time. So any questions about finding your voice or anything like that? If anyone has any, that'd be awesome.
I have a question for you, Dr. Weems.
Yes, sir.
So as officers and as members of these organizations, what's the best thing that we can do to make our voice be not only influential, but also uplifting and positive to those members, those people looking to join our organization?
That's a great question. And I think a lot of that is just sharing a consistent message, one, right? Coming together as a group of officers and in an organization and finding out where you want to be. What is the message that you want to share? How do you want to share that? And as you look at being positive and uplifting, that's something that we all have to focus on, right? Is how do we uplift others? Sometimes that gets challenging because some of the things that we talk about are not always positive. I think about some of the things that we work through on Texas Farm Bureau and some of the policy and legislation that we deal with is not always something that's a positive. It's a challenge for farmers that we're dealing with, and how do we turn that into a uplifting message? I think the key is that you just constantly you communicate with each other, you share that message, you interact with people through your stories. You tell your stories. Use your life lessons. Use your life experiences to share those stories of the message that you want to get across.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Weems. I was
morning.
wondering if you have any small exercises or maybe podcasts that you listen to that can help the kids build their leadership skills.
Sure, I bet I can put some things. I don't have a list with me now, but I can get some things to you and share with Megan, and she can get out that we've used or that we use within our department.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You bet. I see a comment in the chat about how do you share your voice, and I assume that relating to how I share my voice oftentimes. That's one thing I didn't mention in the presentation. There's so many different ways to share your voice that your voice may not be front and center. Oftentimes, the things that I do to share my voice are helping prepare others and helping give other people the tools so that they can share their voice and share a message. The things that I do with Texas Farm Bureau, we work with our youth programs, and we have our Student Success Series program. We have different leadership programs we'll do throughout the year. We work with members to do our Ag Lead program, to where we help members enhance and develop their leadership skills. And so many times, sharing your voice is helping prepare others and helping give others an opportunity to lift their voice and for them to carry the message forward. And so, when you think about that and you think about how do I share my voice, it doesn't have to be the one that's putting things on social media. It doesn't have to be the one that's standing up in front of the group talking. Oftentimes it may be serving on that officer team and helping that officer team come up with a strategic plan. It may be becoming an ambassador and working through many of the things that those programs do and helping develop and facilitate things that come out of those programs. It may be going in and teaching younger kids about agriculture, or teaching younger kids about different things in a classroom setting. And those are also ways of sharing your voice and interacting with others.
So this question is kind of similar to Grady's. I know since lots of people are in leadership positions, and
Right.
It is very important to be finding your own voice and how to share that. But how
Right.
can we as leaders help others share their voice as well? How would you best go about doing that?
Right. So, I think there's two parts to that, Brinley, that I'll address. And I think the one thing is, when you think about your leadership role, whether that's through 4-H, whether that's through FFA, whether that's through an organization like Texas Farm Bureau, someplace like that, think about what are the goals and the mission and the objective of those organizations. And remember first that when you're representing Texas 4-H, or you're representing Texas FFA, or you're representing an organization like Texas Farm Bureau, there's objectives that come with that. And so you're sharing a message that's consistent for that organization. I think the next thing is, when you work towards helping others find their voice, it's helping them identify their passions, helping them bring out what are they really excited about, what gets those individuals excited and puts them into a comfort zone to where they really want to start engaging and sharing their message with others.
Awesome. Thank you. Do we have any other questions that y'all would like to ask Dr. Weems? All right. Well, wait, I think someone just unmuted. Haskell County, did y'all want to ask anything or no?
We have one more question.
Okay, awesome. Yes.
What connections do you use to connect with people on a daily basis to spread your message?
What do I use to help spread the message or spread my message? So a lot of the ways that I communicate is traveling around and interacting with people, doing different things from emails to phone calls to written communication with individuals. It really depends on what the message is to share, right? And so if I'm interacting with different young farmers and ranchers, that may be through just emailing and communicating with them and working with them on different projects that are going on. Some of it may be interacting with legislators, and we're emailing legislators and communicating with them one-on-one individually. I may be at a conference to where I'm interacting and talking with people. So there's just a wide variety of that. Social media plays a big role, but I don't personally do a lot of things on social media myself, but I interact and work with a lot of people that do use social media as a platform to share their message. Sometimes we don't think, though, one simple post on a social media that may just be a picture in itself becomes an excellent way to share your voice. I was listening this week during our conference, and some individuals were talking about in one of the contests about some of the things that they did. And one of the individuals was sharing a story of a photo that they post on Facebook of trimming hooves on cattle, and how all they did was put that picture up there and listed what they did, and it just went viral with the communication and the engagement, and gave them an opportunity to start sharing their voice about agriculture and what they were doing. And now they have a tremendous following and a platform and an opportunity to talk about agriculture. So it really varies on how you do that or what you do. Most of my communication and most of sharing my voice is working individually one-on-one with people, and then working through others and helping other people develop their messages and share their messages.
Dr. Weems, I've got a question for you if we've got the time, Brindley. All right, I'll take that as a yes. So obviously your job has you interact with a lot of people on a daily basis. But for us and our age group, a lot of the people who we're going to be interacting with and advocating to will be our peers. So in your opinion, what are some trends that you've seen, or maybe methods that tend to work pretty well when advocating to our age group?
Definitely, I think y'all could probably teach me more about advocating to your peers than I could ever teach you about advocating to your peers. But, definitely one of the biggest pieces is the social media platforms. And, I like I said, I don't use them as much as many others and communicate, but we talk a lot about how we need to find ways to interact and engage with that audience, and that social media plays a big role in that. My most used social media platform is Facebook, and that's not going to interact with a lot of the younger generations. And so I think y'all could probably tell me the better ways to interact amongst your peers. I think the key, though, is that sharing a message, whatever platform you use to share that message, finding ways to interact with peers and get that message to spread is the important part. And I guess what I mean by that is oftentimes one of our biggest challenges is that we stay in our bubble and we don't talk outside of our bubble. So if you're talking to your peers about a message that relates to anything, whether that's agriculture advocacy or just something that's going on in the community that you're working on or whatever it is, oftentimes you're communicating with a circle of people that have the same mindset or ideas that you do. And so finding a way to get outside of that bubble, we talk about it a lot in Farm Bureau about getting outside your fence rows, right? Farmers and ranchers are the worst about, we want to go to the farm and we want to stay on the farm and work on the farm and not step outside that fence row and go engage in conversation with people that have a different mindset than us. And so I think that's the key, is figure out a way, whatever platform that is, figure out a way to be able to interact with your peers, but get that message to continue to grow and expand outside of that group, so that you really can start impacting others and have an engaging conversation.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Bet.
I actually had one more question.
Okay.
But this kind of goes back to challenges. So, sometimes messages aren't supported by all people. How would you best say to go about handling or figuring the best way to turn those challenges into positives and figure out the best solution in those cases?
Right. So that's always something that you're going to face when you get active in sharing your story. That's one of the things that I mentioned in the list was talking about the characteristics of the perfect person to engage in conversation with versus engaging in a conversation with someone that's a little bit more challenging. And so regardless of your message, you will come across people that have a different mindset than you. And I think the important thing is that you're mindful of that you understand that they have a different viewpoint than you do with the message that you want to share. And it starts with understanding that. Once you're able to understand that, then you can begin developing and engaging in a conversation to go from there. And so being understanding is probably something that's really important. A lot of times I'll see on social media, somebody will post something and someone else will disagree with that. And the response is so important because sometimes it may be, well, help me. I disagree with that. Help me understand where you come from, or help me understand why you have that mindset, and go from there and start engaging in that conversation that way. Because many times we'll get emotional and we'll want to react and we'll want to say something that may not be that may turn that individual off or turn us off to where we don't want to engage in that conversation. So being understanding, being considerate, being mindful, and wanting to understand their story makes it much easier for them to want to hear your story. And that gives you an opportunity to share your voice.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Do you have any other questions? Okay, well, Dr. Weems, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today at the conference and shedding some light on sharing our message and finding our passion and things like that. It's definitely something that I think all of us, no matter our age, can definitely apply that towards our life and find our own and help others to find that as well. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. It means a lot. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity, Brinley.
Yes, of course. All right. So now we are going to have a 5-minute break, and then we will get to hear from the lovely Miss Wendy Scott. But we're going to do the 5-minute break real fast. So go stretch or anything you need to do, and then we will be back in 5 minutes. Also, if you joined on while we were talking, if you can put your name in the chat. And if you're with a county or something, put all of those who are with you listening right now. Thank you. Okay, so we're about to get started back. But first, before we hear from our next speaker, we're going to do some door prizes. So we're giving away two $25 Amazon gift cards. So I'm going to hand it over to Miss Megan Parr.
Good morning. Okay, so thanks to our sponsor, Texas Farm Bureau, we have some gift cards that we are going to give away today. And the way this is work, Wendy, yeah, I'll put your name in there. As we go towards the end of the conference this morning, the gift cards get bigger. So this morning, we're going to start out with two $25 ones, and then we'll have a $50 one, and then we'll have a $100 one at the very end. Okay, so you have to stay to the end to be counted in for the drawing, because I redo the names each time of who's in there. Okay, so with that, if your name is drawn, also, I need you to send me a direct message in the chat box with your email address so I can send that gift card to you. Okay. So with that, I have all of our names right here, and I have Justin Hale is here with me, and I'm going to let him pick a name out of our pile here on the table. Okay, so you can pick one more. Okay. Okay, so our first two $25 gift cards go to Delaney Brown and Rebecca Cunningham. Awesome, congratulations. So if you will both, just put your email address in the chat box for me, and I will shoot those over to you.
All right, awesome. Congratulations to those two. And now I'm going to introduce Miss Wendy Scott, the District 2 Texas 4-H Extension Program Specialist. So, Miss Scott, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brinley, and good morning from, I have to say, Red Raider land. I love seeing background. Jeremiah, I saw that back there with those double T's. I love it. But yes, good morning from lovely Lubbock, Texas. And I want to thank Megan for asking me to be here. I love talking about youth leadership. And I will tell you, as I go through and talk about some things today, this isn't really something that I did as a kid. I was a 10-year 4-H member, but I was a really selfish 4-H member. I was very much about myself. I was about my own projects. I wasn't about helping other people. And I laugh with county agents now and say, if I would have been my own 4-H'er, I would have been so mad at me over how I did. But it was when I got into the classroom, I taught 11 years before I came to Extension. And in that time, I was an FCS teacher and an FCCLA advisor. So if any of you on here are FCCLA members, I speak your language. I get it with STAR events. And I loved my time with that. And I loved it because that's when I truly started to see the importance of youth leadership and how it could really make a difference in not only my officer teams and things like that, but then how those kids would turn and make a difference in the membership and how that trend continued to trickle down. So there's my 4-H experience. You know, I've been in Extension for 18 years. I've worked with 4-H a long time. I'm married to a county agent. My son's a county agent. We love and believe in the 4-H program. Now, FFA was very unknown to me. I knew it existed. We didn't have it in my high school when I was growing up, but it's there now and has been for several years. But my oldest son is very much an agriculture kid. I mean, that's what, and he's not a kid anymore, but I still call him a kid. He's an agriculture kid. And we knew when it came to high school that he needed to be an FFA, and he knew that too. He knew there were things, and it's not to take away from the 4-H program, but we knew there was skills and things he would develop in FFA that he was not going to get in the 4-H program. And we knew that because my husband and I were both this way. In any county we were ever in, we had these wonderful relationships with the ag teachers that we worked with. And so when Sterling got in high school, he did chapter conducting and PR, and I'm like, yeah, I did that too. He did quiz. He was an Area 1 officer. He did livestock judging. And so we saw him really grow with that and he developed a great relationship with his ag teachers. And even I see Grady on right now. Sterling was, one of his idols and we talk about influencers. One of Sterling's influencers was Grady's ag teacher in Nazareth. And even though that's an hour and 15 minutes from Lubbock, they traveled together. Mr. Heck traveled with that officer team and just had an amazing influence on Sterling and on his life. So I believe in all three programs. I think they're all three important. And so we're not going to focus on, I just want to give some background where I'm just not coming to you with 4-H experience. I've got some other things with it too. And it's not about me, it's about what I see it doing for kids. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to turn your screen on, and I'm just going to do this for just a moment. Turn your screens on if you can. I know some of you may not be able to. And y'all, I'm sorry, I'm a hand user, so Grady's used to this. I use my hands a lot. So what I'd love you to do, and I'll give everybody a moment here. There's Collier up there in the Panhandle, Texas. All right, what I'd love for you to do right now is if you like chocolate chip cookies, I want you to give me a thumbs up. And if you don't, I want you to give me a thumbs down. So see, we got some ups, down. Delaney, we're gonna, but that's okay. Everybody has their opinion. All right, we got some thumbs up there in Haskell County. We say, okay, oh, look at y'all. Okay, this is gonna fit perfectly. All right, you can turn your cameras off if you would like. When Megan asked me to do this and talking about leadership and what to do with it, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do. And then I texted Megan, I think it was Megan maybe last week, and I said, oh, I've been awake since 1:15, and about, I don't know, 4:15, God just gave me this idea. It was leadership and a chocolate chip cookie. And it's really interesting the things that we can learn from a chocolate chip cookie related to leadership. And y'all, I apologize, I've got my iPad sitting here too. I've made so many notes on this that I don't want to leave any stone unturned. So I'm going to glance and look and just make sure I stay on target, because the other thing I'll do is I start chasing rabbits. So I got to keep on our time schedule here. I will say this, I do have a blueprint of what, the next 40 minutes, whatever we take, what it looks like, but there may be some things that are very off the cuff, and that's going to be based on your input. So the more you can communicate with me in the chat, there may be some things you put that I may really run with, that we may camp on and we may talk about for a little bit when it's related to youth leadership. So please feel free to communicate. Now, I'm only going to screen share for just a moment. And there's something I want to show you, and hopefully I can screen share. Sometimes I have problems with this. We're going to go to something here. And y'all, once I screen share, I'm not going to be able to see the chat. So hopefully you can see this. I think I see it. It's up. We did something a few years ago here in District 2, back when, all this mess, I'm not even going to y'all know the mess that's been going on the last 2 years. And so to have something to do that summer is we had projects, we called them D2 4-H hot summer projects. And the one that I led was leadership. So as I'm going through and I'm looking for things to do, I find this life skills wheel. And as I look at this, and I will tell you, I'm going to share this with Megan so she can share it with you, because I want this to be something you really camp on and you look at. As I looked at these as life skills, really, these are leadership skills. And we refer to these a lot as soft skills, skills that we hope you have, skills that we hope you develop in going into the workforce, in your leadership positions. And that's why, again, we're not going to camp on this long. I just wanted you to see, and yes, it's based around our 4-H's. And then you can see those 4-H's, there's 8 other words, and then there's these spokes that come off of it. So as we look at some of these things, and I'm just going to pull some of them out: resiliency, communication, cooperation, social skills, contributions to a group effort. Yes, we say life skills. These are leadership skills. And we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about each one of these today. That's not why I'm here, is to talk about each one of these. But I think this is going to lead your group, whoever you are, if you're a county council, state council, the state FFA officers, if you're just sitting as a member of a 4-H or FFA program, I think these are things that you can use that can make your program look so different. So now I'm going to stop screen sharing. That's the only time I'm going to screen share today. That's it. But like I said, I'm going to share that with Megan for you to have it. So I'm going to refer back to that wheel quite a bit. Now, I will tell you, as I put this together, I texted Megan yesterday. I made homemade chocolate chip cookies. And I'm sorry that we're not in person, because I would share these with you. Y'all, they smell so good. And this may be the best recipe I've ever used. I've never used this recipe before, but yesterday, as I made these cookies, number one, I did this because as a leader, you don't ever want to ask your peers, adults, anyone to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. And I'll tell you, a challenge is coming. I'm going to challenge you with some things on the end of this. There's a challenge coming to make some cookies. So I needed to do it too. Now I followed and I'll share this recipe too with Megan so she can share with you, Magnolia Bakery. And if none of you have ever been to New York City and been to this bakery, they're famous for this right here. It's these wonderful cupcakes. They're an unbelievable cupcake. I can't describe how good they are. I pulled out my cookbook and I thought, I'm going to use their chocolate chip cookie recipe. As I was making these yesterday, I really sat and processed the parts of leadership that fit a chocolate chip cookie. And we can really apply this to any cookie. It just doesn't have to be chocolate chip, but I think I picked the right one since most of you said you like this. Now I want you to type in the chat because I can see the chat again. If you're going to make chocolate chip cookies, what's the first thing you do? Throw it out. Now let y'all talk. If you're in a group, y'all can talk or process, and I'm going to watch the chat box over here. What is the first thing you do when you make chocolate chip cookies? Wash your hands. Grady, spoken like a true food person. Get the recipe, read the recipe, cream your butter and your sugar, set out the butter to soften. We're going to talk about that one, Kelly. Mix the ingredients, go to the store. Okay. I love all your ideas. So as I'm doing this yesterday, the first thing I did that I don't normally do, I will tell you, when I made these yesterday, my thought process was so different. Normally, I don't get, okay, Allie, you said it, set out the ingredients. Normally, I don't do that. I'm usually a fly by the seat of my pants. You know, when I need flour, I go get flour. When I need baking soda, I go get baking soda. Yeah, I'm that person. But yesterday, I was very methodical in my thought process. And we're going to get to a point on that in a moment too. But I got my ingredients out together and I read the recipe. Normally, I really don't do that either. I just step by step and I go with it. Very methodical yesterday. So everything you told me, I mean, none of those are wrong. They're all right. We read the recipe, we get our equipment together, we get the ingredients together. The big question here is, why do we do that? And I'm going to wait on your answers. Why? Why do we take the time to get ingredients out, to get the equipment, to let the butter soften, to do all the things that you said, to cream the butter and the sugar? Why do we do that ahead of time? Why do we just not do it in the middle of making the cookie? Ha ha. Kelly, it's like you read my mind. Make the end product better. That fits exactly what I was going to say. And Kelly didn't know what I was talking about today. Everything we need to make it right. One of my 4-H'ers. Way to go, Haskell County. So the cookies can come out the best they can be. Okay, y'all are exactly right. And that's what I wrote down to guarantee success. Now, I want you to think about this. And again, I wish I knew everybody's background and what we're looking at here. I want you to think about that from a leadership standpoint. And I'm not going to say a leadership, and hopefully you would all agree with this. I don't think leaders always necessarily have a title. Anybody can be a leader. Anybody can do this. But I think as we look at this cookie making process, how can we apply that same thing to some of the responsibilities you have as leaders? Whether it's planning a meeting, planning an entire workshop, I talked to Grady McAllister last night. He's one of my old D2 4-H'ers about planning state convention. Some of you may be responsible for planning your 4-H banquets. What if we brought that same thought process to, that getting ready for a recipe? If we brought that same thought process to planning the parts of things that you're responsible for. So I'll go back to the life skills wheel and think about that from a leadership standpoint. So let's take a meeting. Okay. And the typical 4-H meeting, I'm sure Megan's rolling her eyes right now about the typical 4-H meeting, the inspiration, we're going to have some snacks, we're going to have a program, we're going to have the business meeting. Okay. We look at these overarching things we have to have, but do we ever think about the leadership skills, the equipment, the ingredients we need to make that a successful meeting, a successful workshop, a successful state convention? And that's why I'm going to share that life skills wheel with you, because I want you to look at that and think, okay, we're going to make this successful, it's not about just having speakers, it's not about just having snacks. What else can we bring to the table to ensure that end product, you said it, that end product is going to be successful? Lots of planning on the front end. Things have to happen there. Go back to the life skills. Well, so I'm going to camp here. This is off script. So let's take just a typical meeting. Okay. I don't care if it's 4-H FFA meeting, your monthly meeting, whatever it is. What are some pieces to it? And think, even though you can't see the life skills wheel, but I want you to think leadership skills. What are some leadership skills that need to be brought to the table to have a successful end product, to make that meeting successful? And I'll wait on your answers in the chat. Organizational skills. Okay. And I'm going to just talk through these as you go, as y'all list. Have you been to a meeting that was very disorganized? It's terrible, isn't it? You don't want to go back. Planning, good communication. Okay, Jeremiah, and there's so many things to do to, whether it's communication prior to about the meetings, this date, this time, at this place, and this is what we're going to do, or it's communication in the midst of it, or it's even communication after. And we're gonna talk about that on the end of this today, that this isn't just stopping today for me and you, I hope not. Communication with the officer team. Okay, so different pieces, having an activity to keep people engaged, snacks. It's not a 4-H meeting without snacks, isn't it? Okay, to keep people engaged. That's probably the biggest complaint I hear from 4-H meetings. Not necessarily engagement or lack thereof, more of, we went into a meeting for the first time, nobody talked to us, we felt like we didn't belong, and therefore we're not going back. And that's a spoke on that wheel. It's a spoke on that leadership wheel about making people feel welcome when they come to your meetings or they come to your workshops, or again, fill in the blank with whatever that event is. Are people, do they feel welcome? Because if they're not, you're not going to get them back. It's not going to be a good final product when you do that. So anyway, that was a little off the cuff there as we went through that. All right. I even brought in all the ingredients for cookies, and we're not going to talk about every single one of these. I may, bring it across and say what it does or whatever. So we're going to talk first about just regular ingredients, but then I'm going to get in some, we're going to camp on those and talk about how they relate back to leadership. So the first one, baking soda. All right. This, if you know anything about FCH, anything about cooking, this is your leavening agent. This is what causes your cookies to rise. But also, I didn't know this till I did some research. Also, it encourages browning. I did not know this about baking soda. So there's baking soda, a very important ingredient. The next thing, which is one of our favorite things, is sugar. Okay, we have our sugar. This does multiple things too. We know it adds sweetness. That's kind of the most obvious. It also will add some color and add some crispiness to it. Now, I'm going to pause and say this here. As I went through, and I'm old. I'm just going to tell you I'm old. 1981, I was in 7th grade homemaking. And I still remember my wonderful homemaking teacher, Mrs. Muller, taught us about all the ingredients of cookies and what they do. The one thing I don't remember talking about is how they all work together. And that's what I saw as I was researching all these ingredients. Nothing can work alone. Doesn't that teach you something about leadership? You can't do any of this alone. That's why we talk about officer teams. We talk about the people we get to work with. And I'm going to talk later about youth adult partnerships and things like that. None of this can be done on your own. The same way with the chocolate chip cookie recipe. Nothing works alone. And I even want you to think about the ingredients themselves. Okay. Honestly, I can smell these right now. I want to take a bite so bad I can't stand it. But when you take the ingredients independently, all right. So even though we love sugar, most people don't go, oh, I can't wait to go get a big tablespoon full of sugar and eat it, or a big tablespoonful of flour. Now, an egg, scramble it up and I'll eat it. But for the most part, most of these ingredients by themselves, they don't function well. We're the same way. We may think, oh, I can work independently. I can do all of this. You've got to work with people to have a successful end product. Same way with our ingredients. So I just wanted to pause and say that nothing works by itself, and we can't either. And I'm going to go ahead and throw this out now. I think I have it later in the presentation. We as sometimes adults, and sometimes we are your downfall, and we're going to talk about adults later too, is we try to create you to be these independent beings. And that's fine and dandy, but we've almost started to create a culture that is afraid to ask for help. We don't want you to be afraid to ask for help when it comes to your leadership. If there's training you need, if there's support you need, if there's guidance you need, if there's cheerleading you need, I hope that you have the right adults in your life or your peers, it doesn't matter who it is, that team that will help you do that. It's okay to admit you need help. It's okay to admit that you may be dependent on somebody else. And I will tell you, and Megan's on here, Megan is a person that I'm so dependent on. I mean, she's my soulmate. She's my go-to person in so many things. I can't do life by myself. Ride or die, Megan. That's right. Amen, sister. All right. I digress. Let's go back to some ingredients. I told you I'll start chasing rabbits. All right, so we have some sugar. All right, I didn't bring an egg in here, and I apologize for that. Egg, we know it adds moisture, but interestingly enough, there's some even working it does with the flour and the starch in the flour and the protein, and it just starts to create that binding. It makes your cookies chewy. Brown sugar, oh my goodness. Still delicious, but not something I just want to eat a spoonful of. We got the brown sugar, okay? Moistness, chewiness, browning. And y'all, is there nothing like a fresh package of brown sugar? It's so mushy and it just feels so good. I just love it. All right. Then we have our chocolate chips. Can't have chocolate chip cookies without chocolate chips. So I did buy some minis. That's what was suggested in the recipe. I have our chocolate chips. Now let's camp on some of the ingredients and how they relate to leadership. The first is our flour. Okay, I like bringing props into things. We have our flour. I consider the flour to be the base of a cookie. And when I think about the base when it comes to leadership, I think about your strengths. But here's the question, and y'all heard Dr. Weems even mention this about knowing your strengths. And I'm going to share a document with Megan. I've got all kinds of resources I'm going to share with Megan that think she can share with you. Because I see this really being a threefold, okay? And it's about being self-aware. And some of you may be sitting there right now going, yes, I know my strengths. Now, I hate to say along with this, you need to know your weaknesses too, but we're going to focus on strengths because we're focused on the flour in our cookies. It's our strengths. So you may be very self-aware. You know exactly what your strengths are. The second group, and this group, we're going to work through this, okay? Some of you may think you know your strengths when in essence, they may not be your strengths. The example I have on this is this one right here. And I hear this so much. When I ask, and I usually get two answers, about 95% of the time, these are the two answers I get. When I ask students, hey, what did you learn from 4-H or what did you learn from FFA? These are the two responses I get 95% of the time. The first one is the cop-out answer. I learned leadership skills. Y'all, that is the biggest cop-out answer. Please don't tell people you learn leadership skills. I want to hear specifics. I want to hear you learned empathy. I want to hear you learn teamwork. I want to hear you learn communication. And not just that you learned it, I want to hear some examples of how you learned it. So there's one of the answers I hear a lot. The second answer is this one, and this just, it just hurts my heart. What did you learn from 4-H or FFA? And this is the answer. I learned public speaking skills. Okay. If you can't look at me and you can't not mumble, I'm going to guess public speaking may not be your top strength. Right? And that's okay. For some people, public speaking is not their strength. Maybe it is. And I'm going to go back to some things Dr. Weems says. Maybe you're more the social media person. Maybe you're more the researcher. Maybe you're not the loud person out in front. There's nothing wrong with that. But understand what those are. Now, the third group, and I'll be honest, this was me. I told you I was a very selfish 4-H'er growing up, and I had other leadership positions in high school in various organizations, but I wasn't a good leader. I held a title, and I was terrible at my job. These are the ones that really don't know what their strengths are. And I have no judgment on those people either. I'm like I told you, I'm going to provide Megan with a resource to help you start to find what those strengths are, and not just find what those strengths are, but how to develop those strengths, how to hone those strengths, how to make them better. So that I'm going to give you. So, and I think we probably have a multitude of people on here, and you're okay. No matter what group you fall in, you're still fixable. You're still fit. It's okay. It's okay. So what's your flower? What are your strengths? What's the base of your leadership skills? Now, the next one, and this is one I used to not really think about a whole lot, salt. Okay, salt. And when any of you that do any baking know, salt is not used. It's a pretty small amount. In these cookies, it was half of a teaspoon. That is tiny. That's little. But really, when I hit it with salt is it brings out the flavor of other things. So it brings out the flavor of the butter. It brings out the flavor of the chocolate. And if you don't make a chocolate cake and have some salt in there, oh, it works well. So I think two things we can learn from salt is one, salt brings out the best in others. Do you do that as a leader? Do you bring out the best in others? Or is it very much about, it's about me? I'm the leader. I have a certain color jacket. I'm this. Or is it, are you working to get better, to help others, to enhance others? Now, the second point I think we can get from this, so really from number one, a lot of times I think about that as being the outgoing person, that you're pulling the best out of others. But I have to say this here. I don't think it's necessarily pulling the best out of others and bringing out the best. I think it's knowing also the strengths of your team. That's why I think it's important to take some surveys, to do some things like this, because not everybody's going to have the same strengths. Not everybody's going to have the same weaknesses. Wouldn't it be boring if we did? I think that would be so boring. So, do you bring out the best in others? Secondly, on that is something in a small amount can make a big difference. Some of you may be sitting here right now going, I'm that behind the scenes person. I'm the quiet person. I'm this, and really not giving yourself full credit for what you do bring to the table. And maybe it isn't a small amount. Maybe you're not that person that's loud up in the front and doing all this. You're the very quiet behind the scenes. That doesn't mean you still don't bring something to the table. Maybe you're the salt. Maybe you're the salt. So think about that, how salt relates to you. Are you drawing out the best in others? Do you know their strengths and weaknesses? And if you're that behind the scenes person, you are still very important to that recipe, to that final product that will be successful. Next, and this is one I cheated. Oh my goodness, I cheated for years. I cheated till like Thanksgiving. Butter. If you are not using real butter, if it calls for butter, by golly, you use some butter. Okay. I was a faker. I kept using margarine because in my brain, I'm like, margarine and butter, they're the same thing. Well, no, if they were the same thing, they'd be called the same thing. And they are very, very different. Okay. So my point with butter is this. A lot of people try to fake. They try to fake their leadership skills. That may jive for a while. Eventually people get you figured out. So I was trying to fake in my recipes. I was trying to fake it with margarine. And once I started to use real butter, the difference was amazing. The final product was fabulous. I think the other thing we can learn from butter is this, and some of you said this, that you need to get the butter out to soften. How many of you that do any kind of baking, you cheat, you cut corners, and it said to get the butter out and let it soften and you didn't, so then you try to microwave it. Or you go ahead and stick it in the recipe and it's rock hard and you turn on your mixer and there's butter flying all over your kitchen. That's cutting corners. Y'all, when we try to fake it or we try to cut corners, the finished product isn't going to be good. It's not. So be the real thing. Be genuine. It's okay to admit sometimes as a leader that we don't know. It's okay to admit you have weaknesses. I appreciate leaders when they do that, because leaders aren't always the end all be all know all of everything. It's okay to say you have weaknesses. And I think with that, that's when you go find other ingredients that have the strengths maybe that you're missing. That's what makes a good finished product. That's why we're all different. That's what's good about it. All right, the last one, which is one of my favorite things to use in a recipe, Mexican vanilla. You can't beat this product, okay? Now, some of you may smell this, and I'm not gonna pull my lid off and smell it, but the smell is good, isn't it? But when you go, if you take a little sip of it, like, oh, it's terrible by itself, isn't it? But you put this in a recipe, this is unbelievable. It enhances the flavors of other things. And I will tell you, for the first time in years, I measured my vanilla yesterday. I really followed this recipe yesterday for a reason. I'm going to ask that here in just a moment. But enhances the flavors of others. To me, I refer this almost back to the salt. Are you bringing out the best from others? Are you that salt? And we're talking small amounts. This was a teaspoon and a half teaspoon, that salt. Are you using small amounts to maybe sometimes let others have the limelight, to train others, whatever that may be, whatever that may look like to you, to be that vanilla and the salt, but helping others along the way, that you just can't be a selfish leader. And we're going to talk about servant leadership here in a while. All right. So I wrote this down and I put, just like ingredients working together in a recipe, that you need to be the same way as a leader. You've got to be that same way. That and we're going back to that depending on people. It's depending on others. So maybe you are the salt in a recipe. Who's, and you've got your flour, but who's your butter? Who's your this? That coming together to make a good product. You cannot be afraid to ask for help. You can't be afraid. So if you feel like, okay, Wendy, I know I have this flour. This is my base. These are my skills, but I need help with those. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for training. And we're going to talk about that later too, about how do you do that? How do you ask for help? How do you ask for training? How do you know you need training on something? And so that's going to come at the end of the presentation. All right. So I told y'all, I followed the recipe very strictly yesterday, very strictly. Why would I follow a recipe? And I'll wait on chat answers. Why do we have recipes? Why is there cookbooks? Why did Magnolia see the need to put out a cookbook? Share it with me. Why do we follow a recipe? Are y'all still with me? There you go. Because they know it works. So you don't mess up, because people want what they have through their errors. Oh, perfect recipe. We can help others. Okay. You're right. This is kind of a been there, done that. I love the description that the person gives about this recipe. And she said it was her and her childhood friend developed this recipe in 6th grade. 6th grade. I think that's awesome that, yes, youngsters, even elementary kids, middle school kids can be leaders. But they developed this in 6th grade. It's a tried and true. Now, when we relate that to leadership, I don't want you to get caught up there and think, well, then we always have to, when I say this verbiage, and if Megan Parr's listening, this is the verbiage that drives us crazy. When I ask people, well, why are you doing it that way? Because it's always been done that way. Y'all, that is an organization killing statement. It will kill an organization when you do that. You cannot say, okay, well, we're just gonna keep doing it the same way. So now I have this question, going back to the chocolate chip cookie. How has the chocolate chip cookie changed? How is it different? Okay, we just think this right here. But how can you make it differently? Okay, Haskell County said one thing, not all cookie recipes are the same, and they're not. They're not. This one's very different. Y'all can see this one turns out a little bit flatter. The brown sugar and sugar did its job. But how, and think about this, y'all, there are ways. How has the chocolate chip cookie changed? How is it different? So we know there could be different recipes, different ingredient amounts. That could be one. Come on, y'all. This is easy. Hint, hint. Are there things you like in your chocolate chip cookies besides chocolate chips? Okay. Adding more ingredients. Like what? Y'all give me some ideas. What are some of you that like chocolate chip cookies? Are there other things you like in there? Okay. Nuts. So we see, some of you may like walnuts. Some of you may like pecans. Fruit. Okay. I never thought about fruit in a chocolate chip cookie. Caramel. And there's little caramel bits out there now. Oats. Oh, Collier, you're going for the healthy option. M&Ms. I like M&Ms in my chocolate chip cookies too. Because chocolate, you can't beat it. Peanut butter. Let me ask this question. What about the shape? And I'm giving you a hint. What about the shape of chocolate chip cookies? Are they always round? Are there Texas shaped chocolate chip cookies, Grady? I need to see these. I will tell you, it was quite a coup. Giant ones. Okay, think of them all. Some of you may do a cookie cake that you've had for your birthday. Okay, there's molds, there's cookie cutters, there's small ones. And I was trying to remember when this probably happened, like the 70s or 80s, when some brilliant person was like, you can take cookie dough and put it in a 9x13 pan and cut them and make cookie bars. That was like, a major deal. Same recipe. They just changed it. They adapted it. And I use this reference, and Megan's heard me use this before. And this is getting off the cookie. We're going to talk about the iPhone. That most of you just think, okay, there's only 13 different iPhones. Y'all, there's not. In the last 13 years, think about this. In the last 13 years, there's been 29 different versions of the iPhone. 29 different versions. So I use that from the standpoint, is your cookie in a rut? Are you still trying to sell your leadership cookie when it's from the 1980s or the 1990s or the 2000s? You've got to change. You've got to brand yourself differently. You've got to make yourself new. So maybe, yeah, you go dig in the cabinet and you go find some cookie cutters. You do something different to bring some excitement to your leadership cookie. That sometimes people don't want just the plain old leadership cookie anymore. They want something different. Think how you've changed. Think how you've changed even as a student. You're not the same student you were in kindergarten. You're a very different student. Different things get your attention. We're the same way. What draws people to your organization? Are you still trying to sell the 1980 FFA 4-H FCCLA program? People aren't going to buy it. You've got to adapt. You've got to change. You've got to update. Y'all, even look at McDonald's. There's McDonald's still coming up all around Lubbock. And I look at the changes they even make on the out. We know the outside of the restaurant, but we know on their menu too. They're changing. They're adapting. We have to do the same thing with our leadership skills. We've got to refresh and update. Okay. So think, how am I going to change my plain old leadership cookie? How am I going to make it different? Now, we're going to talk some negative for a moment. And I hate to do this. And y'all be honest with me. This is what's going to make this conversation go better. What hinders? What keeps you from making a really quality leadership cookie? And if you don't have answers, I do. I hope you do. I hope you do. And we're not going to tarry just too long on these because I don't want to focus on the negative today. But I think these are things we have to talk about. We have to talk about hurdles. Okay, fear of messing up, the fear of failure. Because y'all, we've created that in you. We as adults were like, you can't fail. You have to be a winner. Y'all, you're going to fail. You're going to fail. And yeah, let's say if you don't reach a goal, it is called failure. And that's a pretty ugly word. But hopefully we're learning from the failure. You know, and let's go back to our meeting discussion, 4-H meeting, FFA meeting, or a workshop. And you finish and you just think, that was awful. To me, it is a failure if that's the thought process you keep of, it was terrible, it was awful. But once you get over the sting of it was terrible, then how do you look at it and how do you fix it? To me, that's a rebranding. That's going back to that change in that chocolate chip cookie. And how do we fix it? And then you go back and fix it, okay? That recipe flopped. We didn't bring the right leadership skills to the table. We didn't have the right equipment. Then how do we fix it? And you fix it. But yeah, we've created a group now. And again, I blame the adults for this. We did this to you, that we made it where you can't fail. You're going to fail. I hate to tell you, we all do. We all do. I'm 52, I still fail. I'll fail till the day I die. Okay. But if I don't learn something from that failure and I don't try to fix it, then it is truly a failure. Okay, the corners we cut. And we do that. And Grady, I'm going to go ahead and hit on this one. I'm glad you said that one. And Grady doesn't even know. He knew I was talking about cookies, but he didn't know specifically. I'm going to throw this out, Grady, with that one, the corners we cut. I call that a lazy leader. The ones that instead of making their own chocolate chip cookies, their own leadership cookie, they just run on down to the store and buy some Chips Ahoy. Okay, that's a lazy leader. Don't be a lazy leader. And I'm going to go ahead and say this now, that it to be a good leader, it takes time and it takes effort and it takes skill. It takes so many components to make, so many ingredients, there's that ingredient word again, to make you a successful leader. But it's so worth it in the end. And you know, when you cut corners, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You know, when you try to fake it or you try to cut corners, you know that. All right. Any other ideas? Why, what hinders you from making leadership chocolate chip cookies? And I still have other answers if y'all don't. I just want to see what you come up with first. Be honest with me. Honesty is the only way I can help you. All right, I don't see anything coming across yet, so I'm going to go look at my list over here. Think back to those ingredients is maybe when you sit down, and y'all told me in the beginning, get your ingredients, you go to the store, you get ingredients, we get our equipment, we start doing things. What happens if you go to make your leadership cookie and you notice you don't have your ingredients, you don't have the skills? And sometimes we do that. We get into something and we think, I don't have the skill to be able to do this. So how we fix that is you either go find other ingredients, you find other people and find what their flour is, their strengths, or by golly, if we haven't learned this in the last 2 years, we adapt. We adapt. So I'm thinking some of you even on here, maybe you're glucose intolerant. You can't, you can't, or gluten intolerant. You can't have flour. Okay. We adapt that recipe. We change it. We have to adapt in today's society. We adapt or we're dead. You've got to adapt. Okay. Another one I wrote down, and oh, y'all, I don't even want to say this, but it's true. It's true. A lot of us, especially in extension, we're type A personalities. We lack control. We lack control. So I wrote down, adults try to make the cookie for you. And I'm sure some of you maybe you're with your county agent right now and you're like, I don't want to nod, be like, yeah, the adult in my life does everything for me. But I see that so much. But I think we have to camp on this for a minute and talk about that one. And y'all be blunt, okay? This can only be good if you're blunt with me. Why do adults try to do everything for you? Or maybe not everything, a lot of things for you. Why do adults do that? I know you've all been in this situation. We all have. Okay, they want to succeed. And sometimes that's not such a bad thing, but sometimes, is the success more about them as the adult, or is it more about we want the program to be successful? Two very different versions there, because they don't want you to mess up or get in trouble. That's a good one, Allie. Fear the project, they're leading failing, so they do everything they can to prevent that. Yeah, adults don't like failure either. We don't like it. I think sometimes there's various reasons, and everything you said was correct. I think sometimes, I'm going to say two things here, because I think it's both sides of the coin. I think sometimes we've seen leaders, and hopefully you have not been in this boat, but you probably have. I did, where I said, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. And I had zero follow through. So I think adults have seen that. They've seen the lack of follow through. They've seen the lack of planning. And so they say, okay, instead of putting this in the kids' hands anymore, I'm just going to do it myself. Okay, probably all of you have seen that somewhere. I think the flip side of that is there's just some that are just controlling. You may be the best youth leader ever. You want to have a youth voice. You want to make a difference. You want to plan. You want to implement. You want to do. And still they won't turn that control loose. To me, that's not that part, but the beautiful part of FFA and 4-H is we can, if people are all on the same page, we can have this beautiful youth adult partnership. To me, that's one of my favorite parts of the job. And as I relate this back to a recipe, this would be more of, I think my district council, they're in the kitchen, they're making the recipe, they're getting everything together. And I'm just sitting on the outskirts. I'm there if they need me. I'm there for guidance. I'm there to answer questions. But I don't want to be the one to get in the kitchen and be like, all you kids get out of my way and you let me make the cookies. I'll get them all mixed up. I'll get them baked. I'll get them cooled. I'll get them put on the tray. I will do all this. That's where we really set youth leaders up for failure. And I'll say this too. And I've told agents this for the last year. I've really talked about this. And this was really throwing a stone at myself too. A lot of times we think when, and I told y'all, to me, youth leaders, you may have a title, you may not. I think it's all good on both realms. But I think so many times you get a title and we as the adults automatically think, well, they've got the title, they know what to do. And the example I give on this one is back when I was a county agent, I had my county ambassadors. And one thing I was turning over to them was we had a big golf tournament. It was our biggest fundraiser. And normally all the adult leaders were the ones that collected all the money for the golf tournament. And I thought, no, that needs to be the ambassador's job. We brought the ambassadors in one day and we did some training on some other things. And I said, okay, it's golf tournament time. Here's your list of people to call, get after it. And they all just did this. They looked at me and I was like, why are y'all looking at me? Chop, chop, get in there and get on the phone and get calling. And they're like, Wendy, and I was glad they could admit this. They said, Wendy, we don't know what to say. And if it wasn't a knock on my head of, Wendy, here you have these wonderful kids, they just needed some training. And so we talked about, okay, how do you ask for somebody? How do you ask for money? If they say yes, then what do you do? If they say no, what do you do? We talked about all this. And y'all, within a few hours, that group had collected $10,000. And all it took was some short training. But I just thought, well, they've got the title. They know how to use a phone. No, they didn't. So adults that are on here, train your kids, train them for what you want them to do, and make it that youth adult partnership where little by little, you start releasing some of the control and we start giving more to the youth. We start doing that where eventually you may just be there. You're just there. They've got the rest of it handled. That's what's going to develop those leadership skills and that will, those soft skills that are going to make you good in college. We have college kids on today. Going to make you good when you get there and make you good when you get into the workforce. All right. Now, the next thing I wrote down is you may go, you know what? My passion isn't even chocolate chip cookies. I don't even like chocolate chip cookies. And Dr. Weems talked about your passion. Okay. So what is your passion? Is it, 5-minute warning. Oh, Megan, I'll talk fast. What is your passion? Is it getting out and speaking? Is it sharing things on social media? You've got to find that passion. You've got to find it. And y'all, only you can do that. You've got to find what that is. And every single one of you may be very different when it comes to that passion. So maybe you're like, I don't like chocolate chip cookies. I like snickerdoodles. I like oatmeal raisin. Okay. Find what your passion is, because just because somebody thinks something is your passion or thinks it should be your passion does not mean it's your passion. And we talked about the lazy leaders. All right. Now I told y'all I made my own cookies. I want you to think about when you make your own leadership cookies, when you really work hard and you start to develop these skills and you really start becoming very self-aware, think how rewarding that is. Yes, it takes time. I told you this, it takes time, it takes skill, it takes effort, but the benefit, the success on the end is going to be fabulous. And I have to say this, it's not just success for you. Good leaders are servant leaders. They think about the people that they serve. So as you look at honing your skills, don't think about it in a prideful way, like I'm making myself better. I'm making myself useful to all these people. Is as you're doing that, think, how can I use my skills to benefit somebody else? To be that salt, to be that vanilla, to enhance what they're doing. And to me, that goes back to what Dr. Weems talked about, helping others be that youth voice. All right. I'm going to give you some challenges, and I'm going to send these to Megan too. First of all, I'm going to send a leadership survey. I would love for you to take it, and I want you to share your results with me, and you'll see it. It's a very simple survey. Share your results with me, and I'm even going to give y'all my cell phone number. I'd rather y'all communicate with me by cell phone than by email. Secondly, and this is really throwing it out there. I know you're like, okay, Wendy, whatever. I want you, if you take on the challenge, it's your choice. I want you to make some cookies. Doesn't have to be chocolate chip. It can be your cookie of choice. I want you to make cookies. And as you're doing it, I want you to think in your brain how you relate it to leadership. And I want you to share that with me. Then the third thing I want you to do is I want you to be that servant leader. And the cookies you make, yes, you can enjoy and eat them, but I want you to share them with somebody. And I want you to take a picture of the person you shared them with, and I want you to text that to me. Okay. So my cell phone number, and I'll stick it in the chat over here. My cell phone number is 806-777-9934. Okay. Communicate with me, share. And I will say this, and I hope Megan's not like, oh gosh, Wendy, we didn't check this out. So we'll make sure this is okay with Megan. A lot of times you're on things like this and you leave for like 2 days and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to make a difference and it's going to be great. And then later you go, who is that lady? She talked about cookies. I don't know what she was doing. I'm putting myself out there. If you want to call me, if you want me to work with your groups, it's all free. I'm not going to charge anybody. But if you really want to go deeper on some of this, let's go deeper, because it can't be done just in one workshop. I mean, let's be honest here. Can't be done in one workshop. It's a continuous reminder, because y'all, I still go to trainings. There's professional development I still do, because no time am I ever going to be at the top of my game. I'm just not. I still get trained even at my age. You got to do it. You got to do it to make yourself better. All right. I'm going to shut my mouth. And Brinley, I think I'm turning it back to you, friend.
Thank you so much, Ms. Scott. That was some awesome insight and some great knowledge about leadership and even how to make our cookies great. So thank you so much for that. I think we are moving on to another giveaway, which means I will hand it back over to Ms. Parr.
Okay, who's ready for another door prize? Okay, so this one, thanks, Les. I'm glad you're ready for another door prize too. So this one is our $50 Amazon gift card. We are going to give away one of these, one $50 one, and I've got all the names right here. Okay, so I've got one name drawn right here, and I have Trevor Gibbs. Trevor, if you will drop your, I'm sorry?
Yes, sweet. I didn't,
yeah,
awesome.
That's awesome. So if you'll drop your email in the chat box, I will send that right over to you.
Will do. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back over to Brinley. Does anybody need a little short 2-minute break before we start our officer panel? If not, then we're going to roll right on into our officer panel so we have more time for questions and discussion with that. Okay, seeing no comments and nobody unmuted. I want to say thank you so much to Wendy for jumping in. Like she said, she and I spend a lot of time together and a lot of time talking about a lot of different things and to do with 4-H. And so it was neat to get to hear her talk today. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brinley to go into our student panel. And so we have Collier Miller, Anna Vela, Grady McAllister, Delaney Brown, and Jeremiah Steff that are on with us to be part of our FFA 4-H officer panel. And Brinley Allison is going to be our moderator.
Okay, so before we start with the questions, I would just like each officer to jump on real fast and just restate your name, say where you're from, what either school you attend or university, and what position you hold, please. So let's start with Collier.
Hi, my name is Collier Miller, and I attend Panhandle High School, which is in Carson County. And this year, I was blessed to be able to serve as the Texas 4-H Council President.
Trevor, you can go next.
My name is Trevor Gibbs. I attend Ballinger High School, which is in Runnels County, and I am the Texas 4-H Council Health and Safety Officer.
Anna.
Hi, my name is Anna Vela. I attend Edinburgh North High School in Hidalgo County, and I am serving as a delegate at large on the Texas 4-H State Council.
Jeremiah.
As Brinley just said, my name is Jeremiah Steff. I graduated from Beckville in East Texas, but I'm currently attending Texas Tech, and I am one of the vice presidents for the Texas FFA officer team.
Grady.
My name is Grady McAllister. I graduated from Nazareth High School in Castro County, and I'm currently attending West Texas A&M University and serving as the Area 1 State Vice President.
And Ms. Delaney.
Good morning. My name is Delaney Brown. I'm originally from Seminole, Texas, and I'm serving as the Area 2 State Vice President, but I'm attending Texas A&M University this year.
Anyways, so how this is going to work is I'm not going to address a question to any certain officer. I'm just going to ask the question, and then whoever wants to answer first, go ahead and jump on. And we'll just continue from there with the questions. So we're going to start with our first question. The first question is, what pushed you to take a leadership role in your community?
I can probably grab that one if that's all right.
Me, oh, yeah.
Sorry. For me, what pushed me to assume a leadership role in the community was just realizing how much they poured into me. Growing up, I was very involved in the agriculture community, and I was blessed to be in a small rural area that really supported that. And so I had these mentors who had passions for agriculture, and like Dr. Weems stated, they advocated in such a way that I was able to look up to them in a lot of the ways Grady looked up to Miss Scott's son when he was growing up. And so looking up to those individuals and seeing all that they could do for me really wanted me to go out into my community and make that same impact on others.
Collier, did you want to add anything?
I was just gonna say that for me, being able to be a role model and leader to upcoming fellow 4-Hers has really drove me to take up a leadership role in my community. So I could do my part in helping them learn about agriculture. So one day that I know that they can possibly do the same to their youth.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremiah and Collier. Does anyone of the other officers want to add anything else? Okay, we can move on to the next question. So the next question is, what are some local resources that you have found to help you along the way, whether that be people or programs or anything like that? What has helped you to get where you are today?
I'll jump on this one. One resource that I found was my local county agent, Marty Valenkamp. He helped me out through multiple speeches and interview questions, which kind of set myself apart whenever I was running for offices. And I'm really appreciated for him. And that's one thing I would advise for anyone trying to go into an office. Maybe go talk to a county agent or your FFA ag teacher. They have a lot of knowledge and they can teach you a lot of things.
To add on to that, something that I've found is kind of the role models in our lives, the adults, the county agents, ag teachers, professors, not specifically designed or in our area of interest. For example, one that stuck out to me in my high school career was my English teacher. Whenever I wrote an FFA or 4-H speech, whenever I was working on scholarship applications, officer applications, my English teacher came to me and asked if I would send her my work so that she could check over it. So those people that are in our lives that are there to help us, but not necessarily in the direct aspect that we're working with. The English department coming into ag and helping me out with that is something that I found beneficial to look outside of just our little bubble. For our officer team, when we were in Austin the first 2 weeks after we were elected at state convention, we were able to go and visit with Dr. Reams at the Farm Bureau headquarters. And we found that outside of FFA, outside of our organization, that other organization as well that still had the same end goal of ag advocacy. We were able to sit down and realize that we had a lot of curriculum that was aligning with each other that we could better use for each other. So really the best resources we found is outside of our small little bubble, look to those same people that have the overall goal that will help you accomplish it.
Awesome answers, guys. So our next question is, what is one piece of advice you would give to a peer? Have you faced failures along the way, and how did you overcome them?
I'll take this one. My biggest piece of advice for anybody is to take endless opportunities to fail, but never fail at the same thing twice. And so I personally am just a really big advocate for failure because I think that you can learn through that in a lot of different ways, but also get involved and make those connections really early, because a lot of us, we meet those kids maybe our 8th grade freshman year, and then we don't realize it, but these are the kids that we're going to go to college with. And these are the kids that are going to be in our like regular work industry circles and things like that. And so now that I'm in college, I'm seeing the benefits of that because I have friends from all over the state that I met throughout FFA, and I'm sure that many of you would through 4-H and things like that. And so if you take opportunities early, then I think that they'll be more beneficial.
Thank you, Delaney. Does anyone want to add anything else?
Yeah, to add a little bit onto what Delaney was saying, take those opportunities, everyone that you can. I'm a big fan of the phrase, you have everything to gain and for doing it and everything to regret for not doing it. So if you're wondering if you should take on that extra contest, that run for that position, whether you think you're going to get it or not, you have everything to gain from going through that process, from learning things about yourself through the interview questions that are asked for you, and you having to search for your answer to those things. You have more to gain from going through that process, whether you achieve your overall goal or not. You have everything to gain from doing it and everything to regret for not.
Awesome, that was really good. So our next question is, what is the hardest thing about being a leader for you?
I guess one of the hardest things for me is being able to step up and be an example for others and being a role model. I think that's one of the hardest things for me as a state officer because of how many people that for anything that you do, you can affect. And so for every maybe bad example you put out there, there are, hundreds of thousands of people who might see you do that. And it's just, I think that's one of the hardest things for me to accomplish and always be on my toes and always set good examples for others. And I think that's one of the hardest for me.
I would also like to add on to that. Personally, I think I find myself still feeling a little bit more shy, even though I have different platforms that I've earned and I'm able to now utilize. I find myself not really wanting to go out of my comfort zone or still feeling a little uneasy with taking on new tasks. But at the end of the day, I know that in order to do something greater, I need to go out and better myself by doing those harder things.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with it's every day you have to wake up and decide to put yourself out of your comfort zone because you realize the importance and urgency of your role and the role we've all been blessed with. So I definitely agree with the both of y'all on that. The next question is, what is one life lesson you have developed by holding a state officer position?
Something that I realized. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Okay, if you insist. I think one of the biggest things for any leader to realize, not maybe just a state officer, is that there are going to be times where, yes, you're uncomfortable and maybe you don't feel prepared for a situation. But in those situations, all you can do is try. Going back to our conversation about failure, just because we're in a leadership role, even if we're in a higher position on that leadership ladder, doesn't mean we know everything that we're doing all the time. There are plenty of situations that you can be unprepared for, but as a leader, I think your core responsibility is being willing to step up and try those things that those that follow you might not be willing to do.
In addition to what Jeremiah was saying, something that I came to the realization of is there's going to be times where it doesn't matter what you're working on, what aspect of the organization you're in, there's going to be times where you don't have an answer. And it's kind of scary to think that you could be with members and them ask you a question, you don't know the answer. You cannot give them a genuine answer. And at times you just have to say, I don't know, but I can find out for you. And so that's been one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is that you're not going to know everything. I'm a farm kid through and through, but there's still questions that I get asked about farming practices that I don't know and I have to research. And so no matter how much you know, there's always going to be more information than you have currently that you're going to have to find.
Awesome, guys. Does anyone else want to add anything about what they've learned or a life lesson they've learned through their position? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. What assets have you developed while being a state officer? How might you encourage youth to become a state officer?
I think the biggest asset that I've acquired through state office is just our area of influence and networking, because as a state officer, like, we have the opportunity to reach not only our districts or our areas, but people all across the state. And so being in College Station, I've been able to work with Area 12 a little bit. I've been able to work with Area 3 a little bit. And so not only being able to reach my general area, but also those other areas, and then make those connections with people that will eventually be in college with me or in the workforce with me.
Going on with what Delaney said, I know our area of influence is a lot bigger than we actually perceive it to be, but I think that influencing the kids from the Rio Grande Valley, since it's such a southern part of Texas, and they don't really see what is going on upstate, I'm able to show them insight onto what state council is all about, and overall how fun it is and what an amazing opportunity it is, and just how they can become a part of this amazing state council and continue influencing other kids as they go on through the years.
Those were really good answers to the assets you have developed. Do you think, could one of you hit on how you might use those assets and encourage the youth, or how you have been encouraging the youth thus far?
I think to add on with what Delaney said, with being able to connect with others and have that connection with other people around the state and local, you can encourage youth by lots of ways. Since you have that connection, you can tell them all the great things you've learned while being an officer, all the experiences you've had the opportunity to just have a good time, and the characteristic traits you learn while being an officer. One thing I would do to encourage people is just tell them what it's about and why it's such a substantial part of our everyday life in the ag awareness industry and multiple other industries. That's about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Trevor. Our next question is, what are some ways that a small community can make an impact on a large scale spectrum?
I can take this one. So being from a small town, it was sometimes hard to make an impact on a large scale spectrum. But the more opportunities you take and the more you expand your horizon, the better your chances are of creating a large scale impact. Just taking every opportunity that comes to you and seizing every moment can really help you broaden your horizon and really reach other people to really make a large impact on someone that you might not even know you could have made an impact on.
Coming from the same shoes as Collier, growing up in Nazareth with 300 people in our town, I didn't think we would ever have a very big impact. It's a tiny town, you blink when you're driving through it and you miss it. But something that my FFA chapter did as a fundraiser was we smoked hams, and we ended up building a reputation. And now we sell 1,000, 1,200 hams to people all across different states, different areas across the state of Texas, have not only reached just a small amount of income for our students that can help them achieve things, but now our name is out there nationwide for, something as simple as a smoked ham. And so we saw an opportunity there that we could provide something small for our students, and from there reached on to inspiring other chapters to take over similar fundraisers and getting a name wider for us. We saw a small opportunity and didn't imagine the impact that it could have, and it grew and spread like wildfire.
Jeremiah, did you want to add any?
I will. Grady, me and you have a perfect timing. It just happens to intersect every time. I think it kind of goes back to what Trevor was talking about earlier. He mentioned that one of the biggest pressures on a leader is all the eyes on you and the precedent that you have to set every time you walk out that door in the morning. But I think in the same light, it can be a positive aspect when you turn that to a community standpoint. So my little town of 800 people in Beckville, America is just a touch bigger than Nazareth. But if you have such a small community of people who are truly passionate, truly driven to accomplish a goal, whether that goal has to relate to agriculture or not, if it's smoking hams like Nazareth does, or if it's cleaning up local communities of lower income houses that can't afford it, if you're truly passionate about what you're doing, then people take notice of that, and people are willing to follow the lead of other passionate people. People see Nazareth passionately smoking hams, they take notice of that, and word spreads. So even more than word of mouth, if you're posting about that on social media, getting into your local newspapers, all of those outlets that give people opportunities to see your community and the passion that you have for whatever project it is that you're undertaking, I think that really guides others, and they see that community, even as a small one, as a role model and a trendsetter, if you would.
Awesome. Yeah, I really think it's about the actions that you can take, no matter how small your community may be. Like, one person can make a difference, and people are going to notice that. People are going to want to know why you're doing what you're doing, and therefore just starting a ripple effect of learning about your passion. And then that gives you the chance to reach more people and spread your message for sure. Next question is, why would you encourage someone to become a state officer?
I can take the lead on this one. The main reason that I would encourage someone to become a state officer is so that they can watch others grow. Being in Collier's shoes 2 years ago, I met Collier and known him for years. He's D1, I'm D2, and we collaborate a lot with some camps. And so getting to see, him and a lot of my other friends just through the years as we mature together, not necessarily getting something ourselves out of being a state officer, not getting any recognition. That's not the goal of being a state officer. The goal of being a state officer is to help not only your specific area grow, but also give that small side of influence that people in South Texas might not see that comes from the Panhandle. Getting to share your part of your life with other people and watching them apply it and grow in every aspect of their life. And so my main encouragement for anyone who's asked me about becoming a state officer has been to be able to see and share growth with people your age, but also people younger, and get to watch them mature and grow into more levels and more aspects of their life.
That was really good, Brady. I would definitely agree. There's nothing like seeing other people be inspired and get excited about their passion, and seeing them grow and become something that they used to dream about. Like programs that some of the programs 4-H does is like JLR, where we work with younger kids, and just getting to see them get excited about 4-H and the programs it has to offer brings me the most joy, for myself at least. So I would totally agree. Does anyone else want to add why you would encourage, or I can move on to the next question? Okay, we'll just go ahead and move on. What is your favorite part about being a state officer? This is similar to the one before this, but if anyone else has something else they like about being a state officer, go ahead and add to it.
One of my favorite parts about being a state officer is being able to plant those seeds with those students and then see them kind of grow throughout the rest of the year. Grady and I had the pleasure of going out to a El Paso chapter in my area a couple of weeks ago, and they expressed a lot of their needs and a lot of their issues with like not understanding the opportunities and things like that. And so we got to be able to do a workshop with them and to just sit down and talk to them about opportunities. And so to be able to see them take advantage of those opportunities and get involved throughout the rest of the spring and go to leadership camps in the summer and potentially even state convention will be really fulfilling for me.
For me as a state officer, ever since I was little, I grew up in 4-H. I've done numerous activities all throughout my 4-H years. And just being able to serve the organization that has given me so much is an amazing feeling, not to mention meeting new friends and having a voice within the organization, being a state officer and reaching the youth and all the younger generations that want to get involved and that are involved just to become one state officer maybe one day or something great, just because that there was a voice of one state officer many years ago.
Awesome, guys. The next question is, and we kind of hit a little bit on this earlier when we talked about you are in the public's eye a little bit more now that we do hold some positions. The question is, in a world consumed with social media, how do you balance being a leader and a role model while also being a kid?
I think that social media is our biggest area of influence. I know that after we all got elected, we were all sitting in a hotel room one night and just getting follow request after follow request after follow request, and we were like way overwhelmed with it. But I think that you can balance the leadership with also being a kid by just sharing those experiences, by sharing your real life interests as well as the things that you're doing within FFA or 4-H and how they balance and how they correspond with one another. And so I know that a lot of us share maybe our trainings or maybe our when we went to the state fair and got to collaborate with y'all with 4-H, a lot of us posted that on social media. And so that's part of our personal lives because we got to make those connections, but also partly our leadership role on our social media.
Going along with what Delaney said, I think I never really realized how many members are actually watching my social media or pay attention, but I still find myself posting our state fair collaboration and something as simple as my cotillion from this weekend. So I know that those members still see that I'm a kid just like them. I'm still going through my senior years of touring colleges and having fun and still being able to make those real world connections while also being able to serve on a larger platform and just make all of these other activities on a state level happen for them.
Thank you, guys. The next question is, it's a two-part question, but the first one is, what is the biggest struggle you have encountered while being a state officer?
For me, and I bet Grady can agree with me on this one, the biggest struggle I've encountered is something as simple as being able to get involved. Being from up here in the Panhandle of Texas, a lot of meetings and big events are held further central Texas or further south Texas, where for us, it's a little harder to navigate down to those areas, especially with me being in high school. It's hard to find time to get to those events and to find someone to travel with to get down to those events that could be 4 or 5 hours away.
Add on to what Collier was saying, when we get to make that drive, from Panhandle or Canyon down to other areas of the state, if we're going to Austin, if we're going to Houston, that's another 2 days onto the trip. You got a 10 or 8 hour drive onto your timing schedule there. We have to take 2 extra days just to get down there and get back. And so that does take out some more classwork and some more work for jobs. And that's been another struggle is balancing missing classes, both through 4-H and FFA through high school, because, I'm sure a lot of members can relate going down to stock shows, the long drive there. That's another couple of days that you miss. And that's another struggle just to make up that much much more work. That's a problem that, we face up in the Panhandle that some people that live closer to those may not face. but may not also realize.
Thank you, Grady and Collier. The second part, or the other side of that question, is what is the biggest success you have achieved while being a state officer?
I think for me, this kind of goes back to the question of, what's one of the most enjoyable things that we get to do. And Grady talked about it. It's getting to see those people grow. Delaney said planting seeds, and that's exactly what we try to do. We try to build up the next generation so that they can come in behind us and build it up even better, because at the end, that's what leaders do, is we build others to succeed more than we could ever dream to do. And so getting to see members grow in workshops, in small interactions with them, getting to see them on social media, enjoying something that our organization, whether it be 4-H or FFA, has put on for them, seeing those little successes throughout the year really makes everything enjoyable.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Does anyone else would like to add anything about the successes they have seen or achieved throughout their experience as an officer?
I'll add something. So for me, I take this question a little more personal, and I think one of the biggest most successes that I have achieved being a state officer is just learning to be resilient and overcoming disappointment. So when I was running for state office, I didn't make an at-large delegation, and at that moment, I wasn't sure if I was going to make the state officer team. But in the end, it ended up working out for me. And looking back, I realize now that even if something is not set out for you to do, there is still other ways to end with the same goal.
I can definitely agree with Collier, because I was, in fact, in the same exact boat. It's just about if you do fail, there's other ways to get your goals, to reach your goals and get there where you want to be. And it goes back to what Delaney said, just about that quote she used about not failing the same way, but failing out a million times. There's always another way to reach your goals. And then you should never give up just because you fail once. You should try and try again. And I promise you, hard work pays off each time. With that, the next question is, what advice would you give someone that's considering running for a district or area office to prepare them? Okay, let's answer that one first. So what advice would you give someone that is considering running for a district or area office to prepare them?
I can grab a bit of this one. I think because the processes are so different for 4-H and FFA, and even from there, your districts, your regions, your state office running, I think the most important thing that you can do, and it's difficult for a lot of people, is to just figure out who you are. Figure out your core beliefs, your core values. And once you can figure out who you are and you're confident in that, then you need to figure out how to project that to other people. Because I think you see a lot of people in office who are very good at interviews and they're very good at tests, but in here they might not be so solid just because they haven't taken the time to figure out who they are, what they believe in, who they believe in. And I think one of the best things I could tell a district or area officer hopeful is, if you can figure out who you are, then the rest of that process, whatever it looks like, will come easy.
I wanted to add a little bit onto that. I definitely agree about finding yourself and figuring out your core beliefs, because you're going to be asked those questions in interviews, and you have to put yourself out there, and you need to know what you stand for and what you believe in, because that's really important. I would also add, utilizing the people around you. They want to see you succeed. They want to help you get your goals. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask that previous officer who has held that position. Don't be afraid to reach out, because you never know. for one, you're going to have a friend in that person, and two, they might give you some really valuable information that can prepare you for running for those offices. So I would just say use those resources and that circle around you because they care for you and they want to see you succeed. So the second part to that question was, how do all of you as leaders promote those positions to the people around you and to your peers?
Something that I've done whenever I've been, whether it be at a camp or a state convention or a roundup, if I was at an event and I saw someone who was overly social or someone who was quieter, but obviously showed a strength of, you always saw them, they were busybody, they were working around, getting things done. When I noticed individual qualities like that, I would try to approach a person and ask, hey, have you considered running for a position, and highlight whatever their skill is. If you notice them being a social butterfly, hey, I noticed you were around talking to a lot of people and you gained a lot of respect for that. Have you ever considered, running for an office and being in a position where you have an opportunity to do that more? Or if they're quieter and working hard, I noticed you're a hard worker and you've been getting a lot of things accomplished. Have you considered helping out the district, helping out the area, getting things done for them, working for them? Highlighting individual success is something that is going to not only inspire them to run for that first off, but also inspire them to keep working, and others will notice that too. And highlighting individual success is the best way, I think, to inspire someone to run. It gives them a little bit of confidence and gives them a reason to run.
I would definitely agree with what Grady said, because I can remember being on the flip side of the office and running for office. And a state officer, when I was at Roundup one year, just put a little bit of encouragement into me, and they don't realize the kind of impact they had on me that inspired me to run for my dreams, and that I knew I could do that. So I think as leaders, we need to understand, like, people are looking to us and they want that encouragement. So when you get the opportunity, you just, as leaders, like, that is a must. You have to encourage others, because at some point you won't be in that position, and you want good leaders to follow you because you care for the organization that you are leading at that time. So, the next question is, what are the time commitments involved with being an officer? Which I know it's a little different with 4-H and FFA, but if we can have both groups kind of shed some light.
I think for 4-H, one of the hardest time commitments is us still being in high school. And considering that, we have a lot of things that go along with school, as well as, we have sports, and then we have showing livestock and multiple other competitions. And I think the hardest thing is being able to be 100% committed to being an officer role, but also being 100% to whatever competition you're competing in. I think that's one of the hardest things with being an officer. But I think one thing that helps you get through it is setting up a calendar and having a chart for each days, each event is. That way you can be committed to both sides, and you can also talk to each side. If something bad happens and you cannot make that event, you can call them. And just being on your toes and being able to be communicative is one of the biggest key roles in having to be committed to both of those roles.
I think for us, the biggest issue, at least for Jeremiah and myself, would be just the travel. Going back to what Grady said, like, it takes a day to get down and a day to get back. And so as far as time commitments, we have our area travels where we all spend a week with our travel team, Emily and Ember, who take their first year off of college to travel all around the state. And so I know for myself, I'll go back to school for a week next week. And then our second week of classes, I go straight into area travel. And so the biggest important thing for us is to just communicate with those professors and let them know ahead of time. But as far as other time commitments, I know that Jeremiah and a few other teammates are doing a Fort Worth internship. We have our day at the Capitol in February, a few other stock show internships, I believe through Houston. And then in the fall, we had green hand camps and things like that. And so it's just always being available and willing to do that, but also still balancing your school and personal life.
Thank you, Delaney and Trevor. This is our last question. So the question is, what are your major responsibilities?
I would say for representing Area 1, the biggest responsibility for me is making sure that the opinions of Area 1 are reflected in what I do and say. You know, we've got our own different perspectives. We have our own districts and areas that we represent. And so we need to make sure that our voices are heard from that, but that also translates back into the state as a whole. My team's responsibility is to communicate not the individual areas, but the whole state organization as a whole, all of our members. My team's job is to communicate the desires of them to the board of directors, the state staff, people that, you know, that we have duties to fulfill for. Their biggest responsibility is making sure that the voices are heard and doing what we can to carry out those. If we're asked to do something, if we're asked if we can help make something happen, it's our responsibility not only to communicate that to our staff or to the people that help us, but to take the first steps in getting that going.
I have to agree a lot with what Grady said, but I think one of my major responsibilities would be taking all of the input from District 12 and saying it at our state roundup planning meetings or anything that we have doing with state events, because I know that whatever the kids from District 12 are feeling or thinking, that they're not thinking the same things as District 1. So it might be something with travel, if we could do check-ins earlier or little minute things like that. Our major responsibility overall is just to take everyone into consideration and work with their needs and opinions.
Thank you, Grady and Anna. We are unfortunately out of time, but I think any of these officers would be really willing, if you reach out to them to answer any other questions you have, they'd be willing to text you back and let you know about the opportunities you can do and maybe some more of their responsibilities. And I just wanted to say thank you to each of you officers for getting on here and taking a little bit of time out of your day to answer a few questions. It really does mean a lot. And I think that a lot of the counties and the people on this call will take that back and can implement that into their own daily lives. So I'm gonna hand it over to Megan to see what we have to do next.
And people showed up out there, like coworkers.
Brinley, did you ask another question? I'm sorry, I did not hear that.
No, I said I ended it and I was handing it over to you.
Oh, awesome. Okay, let me turn my video back on. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to all of our panelists that joined us today with some great conversation and some great discussion. If we have other questions that come in, I will forward those questions to you guys, and thank you so much for being a part of it. We have one more drawing today for another Amazon gift card. It's a big one, right? Okay, so I have all the names right here. I'm gonna draw one, and this one's going to Anna. Anna is gonna be our big $100 gift card winner. So if you will drop your email address in the chat box for me, that would be great. And I'll get that sent to you. This recording will be on YouTube, hopefully by the end of the day, depending on how long I'm in Waco for today. And so we'll send that follow up with that with all of you as well. So again, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. Be looking for a follow-up email with the recording, the link to the recording, and some follow-up questions that we want to give you all as some further discussion questions. I also want to say a big thank you to Brinley for serving as our MC today and hosting all of us. So thank you so much, and I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your day.